I bought that house as a secret escape route, a place nobody could touch. Yet the first time I pulled up, my mother was standing in my living room measuring window frames like she owned them. Beside her, my brother's wife and a stranger were whispering about listing it. I reversed the car and opened my security app just in time to hear the stranger say the owner did not need to know as long as the paperwork looked right. My name is Hazel Nguyen, and for 36 years, I have existed as a supporting character in the chaotic screenplay of my family's life. I was the safety net, the wallet, the cleaner of messes, and the keeper of secrets that were not mine. But this drive was different. As I guided my sedan up the winding paved curves of Sageview Bluffs, I felt the unfamiliar weight of ownership settling in my chest. It was a terrifying, beautiful weight. I had spent the last 5 years bleeding my budget dry, eating instant oatmeal, and driving a car with a rattling muffler just to secure this silence. This house was my secret. It was a 4-bedroom contemporary build, tucked behind a veil of weeping willows and high-end privacy fencing, purchased under an obscure limited liability company that bore no trace of the name Sullivan, nor my married name, Nguyen. It was the only thing in the world that was strictly, legally, and spiritually mine. The clock on my dashboard read 4:15 in the afternoon. The sky was that bruising shade of purple that happens just before winter twilight sets in. I had the deed in my glove box and a bottle of cheap champagne in the passenger seat. I was not planning a party. I was planning to sit on the floor of my empty living room, listen to the absolute lack of yelling, and drink until I could believe that I had actually escaped. I turned the final corner, my tires crunching softly on the asphalt. My heart did a little flutter, the kind you get when you see a lover across a crowded room. There it was, number 42. The architecture was sharp angles and vast glass, a modern fortress against the world. Then I slammed on my brakes. The motion was instinctual, a physical rejection of what my eyes were seeing. My stomach dropped so hard, I felt bile rise in my throat. There was a silver SUV parked in my driveway. I knew that car. I knew the dent on the rear bumper from where my brother backed into a fire hydrant 2 years ago, and I knew the people standing inside my house. The living room of the Sageview property was essentially a fishbowl, a massive wall of floor-to-ceiling glass that faced the street to capture the valley view. It also captured, with high-definition clarity, the 3 women standing in the center of my empty space. My mother, Diane Sullivan, was standing in the middle of the room. She was wearing her signature camel-colored coat, the one she wore when she wanted to intimidate bank managers or PTA presidents. She was holding a yellow metal tape measure, extending it across the width of the sliding glass doors with the confidence of a woman who had signed the mortgage herself. She snapped the tape back, said something, and pointed imperiously toward the fireplace. Standing next to her was Tessa, my brother's wife. Tessa looked bored, scrolling on her phone, occasionally looking up to nod at whatever Diane was saying. And then there was a third woman. I did not know her name yet, but I knew her type. She was dressed in a sharp black blazer, her hair sprayed into a helmet of blonde ambition, holding a tablet and gesturing with a manicured hand toward the open concept kitchen. I did not get out of the car. The old Hazel, the daughter who sought approval, might have parked, run up the driveway, and demanded to know what was happening, tears streaming down her face. But that Hazel had died somewhere between the second bankruptcy bailout I covered for my brother and the divorce that gave me my new last name. I shifted the gear into reverse. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a cold, crystallized rage. I backed the car up, smooth and quiet, retreating down the hill until I was parked around the bend, hidden by a cluster of evergreen oaks. I killed the engine. I took a deep breath, counting to 4. Then I pulled out my phone. When I closed on the house 3 days ago, the first thing I did was not buy furniture. It was to have a high-end, cloud-based security system installed. It was a habit from my job as a risk management specialist. I assumed the worst-case scenario was a burglary or a squatter. I never calculated that the threat would share my DNA. I opened the security app. The feed loaded, spinning for a second before snapping into a crisp, wide-angle view of the living room I had just fled. The audio crackled to life. It was remarkably clear. "Perfect lighting for the portfolio shots," the blonde woman was saying. Her voice was raspy, professional, and grated on my nerves. She walked into the frame, her heels clicking loudly on the hardwood floors I had spent hours admiring during the inspection. "If we stage it with mid-century modern pieces, we can list it as a premium corporate rental or a short-term executive lease. The market for this zip code is aggressive right now." I watched my mother on the tiny screen. Diane walked over to the blonde woman. "Marla," I heard Tessa say the name and placed a hand on her arm. It was a gesture of intimacy, of conspiracy. "It needs to move fast, Marla," Diane said. Her voice was lower, tighter. I pressed the volume button on the side of my phone until it was maxed out. "Ethan is in a transition period. He needs the optics of success. Living here, even if it is just on paper or for a few months, gives him the address he needs to secure that angel investor. This house is dignified. It is enough to save his reputation." I stared at the phone. My grip was so tight my knuckles turned white. Ethan, my brother, the golden boy who had failed at 3 startups, 2 restaurant ventures, and a crypto scheme, all funded by the emotional and financial cannibalism of this family. They were not just visiting, they were scouting. They were measuring my sanctuary to turn it into a prop for Ethan's next con. Tessa finally looked up from her phone. She walked in a circle, looking at the high ceilings. "It is nice," she admitted, her voice dripping with a reluctant envy. Then she paused, looking at Diane. "But Diane, seriously, what if Hazel finds out? What if she actually objects? I mean, she has been acting weird lately, distant." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Say it," I thought. "Say that I own it." Marla, the stranger, laughed. It was a dry, dismissive sound. She tapped her tablet with a stylus. "Honey, possession is 9/10 of the law, and perception is the other 1/10. Does the sister have the stomach for a fight? Probably not." Marla looked at Diane for confirmation, then turned back to the room. "And honestly, the owner does not really need to know the specifics. Not yet. As long as the paperwork looks right, we can navigate the rest later." "Just make it look legal," Diane said firmly. The sentence hung in the air inside my car like a physical blow. Just make it look legal. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature outside. This was not just a boundary violation. This was not just my mother stealing a key. This was premeditation. They were discussing forgery. They were discussing fraud. And they were discussing it with the casual tone of people deciding what to order for dinner. "I can draft a lease agreement that puts Ethan as the primary tenant with a sublet clause," Marla continued, walking toward the kitchen, pointing at the island. "We get his mail sent here starting tomorrow. Build the paper trail. If Hazel throws a fit, well, eviction laws in this state are a nightmare. It would take her 6 months to get him out. And by then, Ethan will have his funding." "She will not throw a fit," Diane said, waving her hand as if swatting away a fly. "She is a Nguyen now. She is so busy with her little corporate job. She will do what she is told if I explain it is for the family legacy." I closed the app. I sat in the silence of my car for a long time. The champagne bottle in the passenger seat looked ridiculous now, a childish prop from a life I did not actually have. I watched the clock. 10 minutes, 20 minutes. Finally, the silver SUV rolled past my hiding spot, heading down the hill. I waited another 5 minutes, just to be sure. I waited until the red taillights had completely vanished into the gloom of the valley below. Only then did I restart my car. I drove back up the driveway, but the magic was gone. The house did not look like a sanctuary anymore. It looked like a crime scene. It looked like a carcass that vultures had already started picking at. I got out of the car and walked to the front door. I did not have my key out. I wanted to see. I reached out and turned the handle. Locked. I frowned. I pulled out my brand new set of keys, the ones the escrow officer had handed me with such a bright smile, and unlocked the door. I stepped inside. The house smelled different. It smelled of Marla's heavy, floral perfume and the faint, lingering scent of my mother's hairspray. The silence was heavy. I walked to the center of the living room, standing exactly where Diane had stood. I looked at the window frame she had measured. I looked at the floor where Marla's heels had clicked. I felt a wave of nausea, followed by a burning, clarifying anger. They had not just broken in, they had assessed the value of my hard work and decided it was theirs to harvest. They saw my safety as their spare change. I did not scream. I did not throw the champagne bottle through the window. I worked in risk management. When you identify a breach, you do not panic. You secure the asset. I took my phone out again. My fingers flew across the screen, dialing a number I had saved in my contacts for emergencies, though I had hoped to never use it so soon. "A one lock and security," a voice answered. "I need an emergency dispatch," I said. My voice was steady, terrifyingly calm even to my own ears. "I am at 42 Sageview Drive. I need all exterior locks changed. I want high-security deadbolts, and I need to upgrade my camera system to include motion sensors on all perimeter windows and audio recording cloud storage. We can have someone there in 45 minutes, ma'am." "That is an after-hours surcharge." "I do not care about the cost," I said. "Just get here." I hung up. I stood in the darkening room, the shadows stretching long across the floor. I looked at the front door. The lock looked pristine. There were no scratch marks, no broken jamb, no shattered glass. I walked over to it and ran my thumb over the keyhole. It was intact. A cold realization trickled down my spine, colder than the wind outside. I had the only keys. The previous owners had moved to another state and handed over everything at closing. The realtor was a reputable woman from a large firm. So, the question was not just why they were here. The question that made the hair on my arm stand up was simply this: how did they get in to understand why the sight of my mother measuring my windows felt like a violation of the Geneva Conventions? You have to understand the specific, toxic ecosystem of the Sullivan family. We did not function like a normal unit of society. We operated like a failing corporation where my brother was the CEO. My mother was the PR department, and I was the silent partner who kept the lights on by liquidating my own assets. I am not Asian. The name Nguyen is a remnant, a piece of legal armor I kept from a brief, 2-year marriage to a kind man named David when I was 24. When we divorced, it was amicable. He got the cat. I got the name. I kept it not out of sentimentality, but out of survival strategy. Being Hazel Sullivan meant I was public property. Being Hazel Nguyen gave me a layer of bureaucratic camouflage. It created a delightful confusion at dinner parties and, more importantly, it meant that when my brother Ethan Googled family assets or tried to run a background check for cosigners, I was a ghost. Ethan is 2 years older than me. In the mythology Diane Sullivan built, Ethan is the sun around which we are all legally required to orbit. He is handsome in that charming, rugged way that allows men to fail upward for decades. He has the smile of a talk show host and the business acumen of a toddler. For the last 15 years, Ethan has been on the verge of his big break. It is always just around the corner. It is always one check away. There was the artisanal, small-batch whiskey distillery that failed because he forgot to apply for the liquor license until after he leased the warehouse. That cost the family $40,000. Then there was the app that was going to revolutionize dog walking, which turned out to be a Ponzi scheme run by his college roommate. That cost another $25,000. Diane does not see these as failures. She sees them as temporary setbacks for a genius who is too ahead of his time for the world to understand. To my mother, assets are not personal property. In the Sullivan house, money is a communal resource, like air or tap water. The rule was simple, and unspoken resources flow to the person who screams the loudest. Since I was quiet, employed, and responsible, I was considered a surplus. I was the reservoir. Ethan was the drought. If I bought a new car, Diane would ask why I needed something so flashy when Ethan's truck needed a new transmission to get to job interviews he never actually attended. If I took a vacation, I was selfish because Tessa needed help with the credit card bills. Over time, I learned the only way to keep anything for myself was to make sure it did not exist in their reality. I work as a senior risk management specialist for Everline Habitat Studio, a commercial development firm. My entire professional life is built on assessing threats, calculating liabilities, and fortifying weak points. I spend 8 hours a day looking at blueprints and spreadsheets, asking the question, where will this fall apart? It was inevitable that I would eventually turn that gaze toward my own life. 5 years ago, I realized that if I stayed in the visible cycle of the Sullivan economy, I would wake up at 60 with nothing but a drawer full of thank you notes for loans that were never repaid. So, I went underground. I created a poverty simulation for my family. I drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door that I refused to fix. I wore clothes from thrift stores when I visited my mother. I complained constantly about rent hikes and the price of eggs. I told them my salary was 40% lower than it actually was. I became boring. I became broke. I became useless to them. And it worked. The requests for money slowed down because you cannot squeeze blood from a stone. When Ethan needed $10,000 for his latest venture, a drone photography business that lacked both drones and a license, he did not ask me. He asked an uncle. I was safe in my manufactured mediocrity, but in reality, I was hoarding every cent. I was eating rice and beans 4 nights a week, not because I had to, but because every dollar saved was a brick in the wall I was building between me and them. I maxed out my 401k. I built a credit score of 820. I studied the real estate market with the obsession of a forensic accountant. When I finally found this house in Sageview Bluffs, I did not just buy it. I executed a covert operation. I did not want my name on a public deed where any internet-savvy relative could find it. I hired a specialized real estate attorney to set up a blind trust. The house is legally owned by a generic entity called Blue Spruce Holdings, LLC. My name appears nowhere on the initial title search. Even the utility bills are routed through a P.O. box in a neighboring town. I took every precaution. I acted like a spy in a Cold War thriller because I knew my mother's love was conditional on my utility, and my brother's affection was a direct line to my bank account. I looked around the living room, now bathed in the artificial glow of the streetlights filtering through the weeping willows. The locksmith had left an hour ago. The silence should have been comforting. This was what I bought. This 4-bedroom, 3-bath contemporary fortress was supposed to be the physical manifestation of my boundaries. I heard the click of claws on the hardwood floor. Milo trotted into the room, his head low, checking the perimeter. Milo is a rescue. A scruffy terrier mix with one ear that stands up and one that flops over. He was found in a hoarding situation, living in a crate too small for him. When I first got him, he would not eat if anyone was watching. He flinched if you moved too fast. I sat on the floor and patted the spot next to me. Milo hesitated, then crept over and laid his heavy head on my knee. He let out a long, shuddering sigh. We were the same, Milo and I. We both knew that safety was a fragile thing, something you had to guard with bared teeth if necessary. I stroked his wire-haired back, feeling the solid thump of his heart. I had bought this house for him as much as for me. A yard with a high fence, a quiet street where no one yelled, a place where no one would ever kick his crate or tell him he was taking up too much space. But as I sat there, the cold logic of my profession started to dismantle the comfort. The locksmith had confirmed the front door showed no signs of forced entry. That meant they had a key, but that was impossible. The keys had been in a lockbox until the moment of closing, and then they were in my purse. The only other option was that they had accessed the property before I changed the locks, perhaps using a spare key from the seller's side. No. The seller was a 70-year-old widow moving to Florida who did not know anyone in my family. Then I replayed the conversation from the camera in my head. Just make it look legal, Marla had said. The owner does not need to know. My blood ran cold. They knew who the owner was. They knew it was me, Diane had said. She is a Nguyen now. She is so busy with her little corporate job. They knew. But how I had told no one, not a soul. I had not posted it on social media. I had not told my coworkers. I had not even updated my address with the post office yet. The only people who knew about this transaction were my broker, the title company officer, and the bank representative. I stood up, disturbing Milo, who looked at me with worried brown eyes. I began to pace the length of the room, my mind racing through the data points. This was not a coincidence. You do not accidentally stumble upon a house bought by an LLC that happens to be owned by your estranged daughter. You do not accidentally bring a staging expert and your brother's wife to measure drapes in a house you stumbled upon. This was targeted. Someone had access to my personal financial data. Someone had seen the credit pull, or the wire transfer, or the deed recording. And in the modern world, information does not just leak, it is traded. I walked to the kitchen island, the place where Marla had tapped her tablet and planned to sell my sanctuary to save Ethan's ego. I ran my hand over the cold quartz counter. Diane had not just broken in. She had been tracking me. She had likely been watching my financial movements, waiting for the moment the money turned into something tangible, something she could touch, measure, and claim. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I had built a fortress of brick and glass, but I had left a digital gate open somewhere. Or worse, there was a traitor inside the small circle of professionals I had trusted. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. The screen seemed too bright in the dim room. I was not just dealing with a nosy mother or a greedy brother anymore. I was dealing with a breach of privacy so profound it bordered on stalking. I looked at Milo. "We are not safe yet, buddy," I whispered. The house was secure. The locks were new. The cameras were recording. But the enemy was not just outside the door. The enemy was already inside the data. And if they knew about the house, they knew about the mortgage, they knew about the equity, and knowing Ethan, and knowing Diane, they were already figuring out how to leverage it. I did not feel like a homeowner anymore. I felt like a target. And as the darkness fully settled over Sageview Bluffs, I knew that simply changing the locks was akin to putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. I needed to find the leak, and then I needed to plug it, not with silence, but with the ruthless, systematic efficiency of the risk manager they had forced me to become. The morning sun hit the floorboards of my master bedroom at 6:30, casting long golden rectangles across the empty space. For a fleeting moment, I felt a surge of genuine peace. I was waking up in a house that I owned, on a floor I had paid for, surrounded by walls that held no screaming, no debt collectors, and no passive-aggressive notes on the refrigerator. Milo was snoring softly on his dog bed in the corner, his paws twitching in a dream. It was the kind of silence I had purchased with 5 years of skipped vacations and brown bag lunches. Then, my phone buzzed against the hardwood floor. It was not a call. It was a notification from a new group chat titled Sageview Project. My stomach tightened. I reached for the device, the piece evaporating instantly like mist under a heat lamp. The first message was from my mother. "Good morning, Hazel. I know you are probably overwhelmed with the move, so I wanted to get a head start on the logistics for you. The house has incredible bones. It is exactly the kind of family investment asset we have been talking about. Tess and I agree that the downstairs flow is perfect for entertaining, but the paint colors are a bit dated. We can discuss swatches this weekend." I stared at the screen, blinking. There was no mention of the fact that she had been caught on camera trespassing the day before. There was no apology for the violation of privacy. Instead, she had completely rewritten the narrative. In Diane's version of reality, she was not an intruder. She was a helpful project manager. She was gaslighting me via text message before I had even had my coffee, before I could even process a response. A second message popped up. This one was from a number I did not recognize, but the contact card shared in the chat identified her as Marla, Real Estate Solutions. "Hi, Hazel. Lovely property. As I mentioned to Diane yesterday, I have drafted a preliminary proposal for a premium rental setup. If we stage the main suite and the 2 guest rooms by Friday, we can have the listing live for corporate clients by Monday. I have attached a fee schedule. Let's get coffee and sign the engagement letter." I felt a cold prickle of sweat on the back of my neck. Engagement letter. They were moving with the speed of a demolition crew. They were not asking permission. They were creating momentum, hoping I would be too weak or too polite to stop the rolling boulder. Then came the third blow. My phone began to ring. The screen flashed Ethan. I let it ring 3 times. My thumb hovered over the decline button. I knew exactly what this conversation would be. I dealt with hostile negotiations at work every day, contractors trying to cut corners, insurance adjusters trying to deny claims, but nothing drained me quite like the sound of my brother's voice. I answered, "Ethan, Hazel, congratulations." His voice was booming, overly cheerful, the voice he used when he was trying to sell someone a multi-level marketing kit. "Mom told me you finally pulled the trigger on the Sageview place. Bold move. I respect it." "I bought a house, Ethan," I said, keeping my voice flat. "I did not launch a startup." Same thing, he said, dismissing my reality. "Look, the timing is actually spooky good. You know I am in between leases right now. Just until the angel funding for the green tech venture clears escrow. My current place is dragging me down. Bad energy. I need a headquarters that projects stability." "Headquarters," I repeated. "Exactly. I was looking at the floor plan Mom sent over. That basement suite, perfect for a home office. And since you are just one person, you do not need 4 bedrooms. It is wasteful. Really. So here's the plan. I move into the master just for optics. Obviously, since I will be taking meetings there and you take the guest suite upstairs. It is quieter for your remote work anyway. We split utilities. I pay you rent as soon as the funding drops." I closed my eyes. As soon as the funding drops, a phrase I had heard every 6 months for the last decade. "Ethan," I said, gripping the phone tight, "I am not looking for a roommate. I am not looking for a tenant. And I am certainly not giving up my master bedroom in my own house." There was a pause on the other end. The cheerfulness evaporated, replaced by a confused irritation. "Roommate Hazel, I am your brother. I am not some guy from Craigslist. You have 4,000 square feet of empty space. What are you going to do with it, hoard it?" "I am going to live in it," I said. "Alone." "That is ridiculous," Tessa's voice chimed in. She must have been on speakerphone next to him. "Hazel, be realistic. You work 60 hours a week. You are never home. Marla said she could get $3,000 a month for the main floor alone if we position it right. That covers the mortgage. You are throwing money away just to be stubborn." "Tessa," I said, "I did not ask Marla for an opinion. I did not ask you for an opinion, and I did not invite any of you into this house." "We are trying to help you optimize," Ethan snapped. "You always do this. You think small. You think about safety. I am thinking about leverage. This house could be the launch pad for the entire family's comeback if you just stop being so territorial." "I am hanging up," I said. "Do not hang up on me," Ethan warned. "Mom is already coordinating the movers for Saturday. Do not make this awkward." I ended the call. My hand was shaking. Movers for Saturday. They were not asking. They were invading. They viewed my boundaries as suggestions and my property as a communal resource to be mined. I looked back at the group chat. A new photo had been uploaded by Tessa. It was a screenshot of a furniture catalog with a circle around a massive leather sectional. "This would look great in the den. Ethan needs good seating for his pitch meetings." I sat down on the edge of the unmade bed. I needed to be clear. I needed to be undeniable. I could not use the soft language of family. I had to use the hard language of the law. Even if I was just texting, I typed out a message into the group chat. I read it over twice to ensure there was no ambiguity. To everyone in this thread, let me be crystal clear. This house is my primary residence. It is not an investment property. It is not a rental. It is not a halfway house for Ethan. No one is moving in. No one is staging it. No one is listing it. I have changed the locks and installed a new security system. Do not come to the property. Do not send movers. If anyone attempts to enter the premises without my explicit written invitation, I will treat it as a break-in. I hit send. The 3 dancing dots of someone typing appeared almost instantly. It was Diane. I waited, watching the dots appear and disappear. She was editing. She was refining the guilt trip. Finally, the message came through. "Hazel, I am disappointed. I raised you to care about your family, not to hoard wealth like a miser. Your brother is in a crisis. He is falling. And you are standing there with a safety net that you refuse to open just out of spite. You are being selfish. You are cutting off your nose to spite your face." I did not reply. I knew that silence was the only weapon that worked against Diane's emotional shrapnel. But then, a second message arrived from her. This one was different. It did not have the frantic, emotional tone of the first one. It was cold. It was precise. "You think a new lock changes anything? You are a Sullivan. Whether you hide behind that husband's name or not, we made you. We own your success. If you do not open the door for your brother, we will open it by other means." I stared at the words. "We will open it by other means." It was not a physical threat. Diane was not going to come over with a crowbar. She considered manual labor beneath her. This was something else. This was the threat of someone who knew a workaround. I thought back to Marla's voice on the camera recording. Just make it look legal. I thought about the strange way Marla had spoken about the paperwork looking right. My phone pinged again. It was a direct message from Marla. Outside the group chat. "Hazel, I understand tempers are high. Family dynamics can be tricky. But just a heads up. I have already pulled the preliminary title report and the zoning comps for the business license Ethan needs. We have put a lot of work into this already. It would be a shame to waste the processing fees. Let's not let emotions get in the way of a good business deal." Business license. My heart hammered against my ribs. Why would they need a business license for a house I owned, unless they were trying to establish residency? Unless they were trying to prove that Ethan had a legal right to operate from the premises. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the driveway. The street was empty, but I felt exposed. I had treated this like a family dispute, assuming that if I just said no loud enough, they would retreat. But I was wrong. They were not listening to my no because they did not believe I had the authority to say it. In their minds, I was just the placeholder. Diane's threat echoed in my mind. "We will open it by other means." She did not mean the front door. She meant the legal door. She meant the bureaucratic back door. I went downstairs to the kitchen, my footsteps echoing in the hollow house. I checked the new smart lock on the front door. It was engaged. The light was green. But as I looked at it, I realized how fragile it was. A lock only keeps out honest people and common thieves. It does not keep out people who believe they have a divine right to your life. I opened my laptop on the kitchen island. I needed to document this. I needed to save the texts. I took screenshots of everything: the group chat, the threats, the timestamps. I created a folder named Evidence. As I was saving the files, a notification popped up on my email. It was an alert from my bank, the one I used for my daily checking, not the secret account used for the house. Alert address. Change request. Received. I froze. I clicked on the email. "Dear customer, we have received a request to update your primary mailing address to 42 Sageview Drive. If you did not authorize this change, please contact us immediately." I had not authorized that change. I had specifically kept my old P.O. box as my mailing address to keep the house off the radar. They were doing it. They were establishing a paper trail. They were moving my life into the house digitally before they moved Ethan in physically. By changing my address, they were verifying that the family lived there. I grabbed my phone and dialed the bank's fraud department, my fingers trembling slightly. But as I waited on hold, listening to the generic jazz music, I realized the terrifying scope of what was happening. Diane was not just a pushy mother. She was a woman who had spent 40 years manipulating creditors, dodging liens, and shuffling assets to stay afloat. She knew the system better than I did. I knew how to follow the rules. She knew how to bend them until they snapped. "Hello, this is fraud prevention. Can I have your full name?" the agent asked. "Hazel Nguyen," I said, my voice stealing. "Someone is impersonating me. I need to freeze all changes to my account." As I spoke, I looked out the massive living room window. A car slowed down in front of the house. It was a black sedan, moving at a crawl. The passenger window rolled down, and a phone was held up, snapping a photo of the house. It wasn't Ethan. It wasn't Diane. It was Marla. She wasn't hiding. She looked right at the window, saw me standing there, and didn't even flinch. She just finished taking the photo, rolled up the window, and the car sped away. They were building a listing. They were building a portfolio. They were building a lie so big and so detailed that by the time I tried to dismantle it, the world would already believe it was the truth. I hung up the phone after freezing the account. The house felt colder than it had 10 minutes ago. I looked at Milo, who was watching me with his head cocked. They are not just trying to move in. Milo, I whispered to the empty room. They are trying to steal the deed from the inside out. I had bought this house to escape them, but in doing so, I had given them the one thing they wanted most, a fresh, clean asset to corrupt, and they were going to tear me apart piece by piece to get it. Diane was right about one thing. The lock on the door didn't matter. They weren't coming for the furniture. They were coming for the ownership, and the war had just begun. For the next 48 hours, I did not live in a home. I lived in a command center. My dining room table, a beautiful slab of reclaimed oak that I had fantasized about hosting Thanksgiving dinners on, was now covered in hard drives, printed screenshots, and a legal pad where I was manually logging every single interaction. I had turned my life into a spreadsheet. Column A was the aggressor. Column B was the method of contact. Column C was the content of the threat. I was a risk manager. This was how I processed panic. I distilled it into data. The harassment did not come in the form of screaming matches on the front lawn. It was far more insidious. It was a soft war, fought with guilt, social pressure, and administrative violence. It was designed to make me feel crazy, to make me feel like the villain in a story where I was the only one following the rules. On Tuesday morning, the flying monkeys arrived. My phone rang at 9 o'clock. It was my Aunt Carol. Carol was my mother's older sister, a woman who weaponized her fragility and viewed family loyalty as a suicide pact. I had not spoken to her in 6 months, not since I declined to invest in her son's vape shop. I put the phone on speaker and opened a new audio recording file on my laptop. "Hazel, honey," Carol's voice was thick with performative concern. "Your mother called me. She sounded absolutely heartbroken. She said you are in some kind of manic episode, buying a house you cannot afford, and refusing to let your brother help you with the mortgage." I stared at the recording bar bouncing in rhythm with her voice. "I can afford the house, Aunt Carol, and Ethan is not trying to help with the mortgage. He's trying to take over the property." "Oh, stop it," Carol sighed. "Ethan is a visionary. He just needs a runway. Diane told me you changed the locks on your own mother, Hazel. That is cruel. That is elder abuse. We are a family. We share. When your cousin Mike lost his apartment, did I close my door? No. He slept on my couch for 2 years. Mike stole your jewelry." "Carol," I said, my voice flat. "That was a misunderstanding," she snapped. "The point is, you are embarrassing us. People are talking. Do you want to be the reason Ethan fails? Do you want that on your conscience? Just let him stay in the basement. It is just a few months." "It is never just a few months," I said, "and the answer is no." I hung up and logged the call. Time 9:14, duration 3 minutes. Content emotional manipulation, accusation of mental instability, guilt-tripping regarding Ethan's potential failure. By noon, the battlefield had shifted to social media. I did not follow Tessa on Instagram. I had muted her years ago to preserve my sanity. But my friend Sarah sent me a screenshot. It was a photo of Tessa looking wistfully out a window, holding a cup of tea. The caption was a masterpiece of vague booking. It is so hard when you realize that money changes people. You think you know someone's heart, but then they get a little bit of success and suddenly family doesn't matter anymore. Praying for soft hearts and open doors today. Some of us are trying to build a legacy for our children, while others are just building walls. She had tagged it Family First Betrayal. Sad new chapter. My stomach churned. She did not name me, but she did not have to. Our overlapping social circle knew exactly who had just bought a house. The comments were already rolling in. "Oh no. Hun, hope you are okay. Money is the root of all evil. Stay strong. Is this about the sister-in-law you told me about? That is so toxic of her." I felt a flush of shame, hot and prickly. This was their strategy. If they could not legally force their way in, They would socially shame me into opening the door. They wanted me to feel so isolated, so judged, that I would cave just to make the noise stop. I took a screenshot. I saved it to the folder on my desktop named Harassment Public Defamation. I did not comment. I did not engage. Every response I gave would just be fuel for their narrative that I was the aggressor. Then came the email from Ethan. He did not text this time. He sent a Google Calendar invite. The subject line read, Move-in Logistics. Ethan Hazel, Cohabitation. I opened it, my jaw tightening. He had scheduled it for Saturday at 8 in the morning. In the notes section, he had written, Hey Hayes, I know you are stressed. So I took the lead. I have got a buddy with a truck coming at 8. I will need the clicker for the garage door by Friday, so I can start moving the boxes into the basement staging area. Also, I noticed the internet speed at the house is a bit slow on the specs. Can you upgrade to the gigabit fiber package? I need high bandwidth for my trading terminal. Thanks. Sis, love you. He was acting as if our conversation yesterday had never happened. He was bulldozing past my no by simply pretending he had heard yes. It was a power move he had learned from our father. If you act like you own the room, people will usually just hand you the deed to avoid a scene. I declined the invite. I did not add a note. I just clicked decline. 10 seconds later, the invite popped up again. He had resented. I declined it again. He sent it a third time. I blocked his email address. But the digital siege was only half the battle. The real shock came when I went to check the mail. My mailbox was a sleek, locking metal box at the end of the driveway. I had not received much yet, mostly just welcome packets from the HOA and flyers for pizza places. But today, I was expecting a confirmation letter from my bank regarding the account freeze I had requested. I unlocked the box. It was empty. I frowned. The mail truck had already passed. I had seen it go by an hour ago. I walked back up the driveway, a nagging suspicion gnawing at my gut. I called the local post office. This is Hazel and Gwen at 42 Sageview Drive, I said. I am checking on my mail delivery. I haven't received anything for 2 days. The clerk tapped on a keyboard. One moment. Yes, I see a temporary forwarding order was placed on Monday. My blood ran cold. A forwarding order to where? To an address on Elm Street. The clerk read out, 1015 Elm, apartment 4B. That was Ethan's current apartment. I did not authorize that, I said, my voice trembling with rage. I am the owner. I am the only resident. Who signed the request? It was submitted online, the clerk said. It just requires a credit card verification for the $1 fee. I hung up, feeling like the ground was tilting under my feet. They had used a credit card, probably one of mine that I did not know they had access to. Or maybe they just used my name and their own card to divert my mail. This wasn't just about reading my letters. This was about intercepting the deed, the insurance documents, the bank statements. They were trying to blind me. They wanted to control the flow of information so that when they made their move, I wouldn't see the warning signs until it was too late. I immediately went online to the Postal Service website, canceled the forwarding order, and set up a requirement that any future changes had to be done in person with a photo ID. I logged the incident. Incident mail, theft, fraudulent forwarding. Perpetrator unknown. Suspected Ethan Sullivan. Time verified at 2:15 p.m. I needed fresh air. I leashed Milo and walked out the front door. Needing to physically see the perimeter of my property, to remind myself that it was still mine. The air was crisp, smelling of pine and impending rain. I walked down the driveway, Milo trotting beside me. As I reached the sidewalk, a woman in her 60s was walking a golden retriever. She stopped when she saw me. "Oh, hello," she said, smiling. "You must be the owner. I am Brenda, from across the street." "Hi, Brenda," I said, forcing a smile. "Yes, I am Hazel." "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said. Then she tilted her head, looking at the house. "I was actually going to ask you, are you flipping it, or is it a pocket listing?" I froze. "Excuse me." "The house," Brenda said, gesturing to my living room window. "I saw a woman here yesterday while you were at work. Very professional looking. blonde hair. She was standing on the sidewalk with a couple, pointing out the landscaping and talking about the potential for an accessory dwelling unit in the back. I just assumed you were an investor looking to sell it off market. I felt the blood drain from my face. Marla. She hadn't just been measuring drapes inside. She was conducting viewings from the street. She was treating my home like an exhibit. No, Brenda, I said, my voice tight. I am not flipping it. This is my home, and that woman, she does not represent me. Brenda looked confused, sensing the tension. Oh, I see. Well, she seemed very convincing. She handed the couple a brochure. I think I saw one dropped near the fire hydrant. I thanked her and rushed over to the hydrant. Sure enough, mashed into the damp grass, there was a glossy half sheet of paper. I picked it up. It was a flyer. Exclusive opportunity in Sageview Bluffs. It had a photo of my house, the one Marla had taken from the car yesterday. It listed the specs, and at the bottom, in bold text, lease-to-own option available. Contact Marla for details. My hands shook as I held the wet paper. They were marketing my house. They were actually trying to lease it out from under me. They were looking for a tenant, maybe an innocent third party, to sign a contract with Ethan or Marla, create a messy legal deadlock, and force me into a corner. If someone moved in with a signed lease, even a fraudulent one, getting them out in this state would take months. And during those months, Ethan would claim he was the property manager. I walked back into the house, slammed the door, and locked it. Milo looked at me, whining softly. It is okay, boy, I said. Though I didn't believe it, I went to my command center. I did not cry. I did not call my mother to beg. I called the security company again. This is Hazel and Gwen, I said when the dispatcher answered. I need an upgrade. I want the package you usually sell to jewelry stores or high-risk facilities. Okay, what are we looking at? I want wide-angle, 4K cameras covering every inch of the perimeter, specifically the street view. I want motion sensors on the driveway that send instant alerts to my phone. I want audio recording at the front and back doors. And I want everything backed up to an off-site server that cannot be wiped locally. That is going to run you about $3,000 for the install plus the monthly fee, the man said. Do it, I said. Can you come today? I can have a tech there by 5. Good. I hung up. I looked at the wet flyer sitting on my table next to the stack of hard drives. I looked at the calendar invite from Ethan. I looked at the log of Aunt Carol's guilt trip. They thought they were playing a game of chicken. They thought that if they just pushed hard enough, created enough chaos, and made enough legal-looking documents, I would revert to the scared little sister who just wanted everyone to get along. They thought I would trade my sanctuary for their approval, but they had miscalculated. They didn't realize that in my line of work, we don't negotiate with liabilities. We eliminate them. I picked up the flyer and smoothed it out. I wasn't just going to block them anymore. I was going to let them walk right into the trap they were building. You want it to look legal? I whispered to the empty room, my voice cold and steady. Fine, I will show you what legal really looks like. I opened a new tab on my browser and typed in the search bar state laws regarding real estate fraud and conspiracy to commit forgery. If they wanted a war of paperwork, I was going to bury them in it. The flyer Marla had left on the fire hydrant was not just a piece of marketing, it was a crumb, and I followed it with the obsession of a starving animal. I spent Wednesday night drowning in the blue light of my laptop screen, navigating the archaic, clunky interface of the county clerk's public records portal. Most people assume that stealing a house involves physical force breaking a window, changing a lock, squatting in the living room, but I knew that real theft, the kind that ruins lives, happens in quiet rooms with rubber stamps and filing fees. I searched for my property's parcel number. The system was slow, the loading wheel spinning like a taunt. When the page finally refreshed, everything looked normal at first glance. There was the deed recording from last week, listing Blue Spruce Holdings LLC as the owner. There was the tax assessment. But then, I saw it. At the very bottom of the Pending in Process tab, there was a log entry dated 2 days ago, the same day my mother had stood in my living room. Inquiry type. Notary scheduling. Title search request. Requester E. Sullivan. My breath hitched. They were not just looking at the house. They were running a title search. You only run a title search if you are preparing to transfer ownership or borrow against the equity. Before I could fully process what I was seeing, my cell phone rang. It was a block number. My heart jumped, thinking it was Ethan again, but I answered it anyway. "This is Hazel Nguyen," I said, my voice tight. "Good morning, Ms. Nguyen. This is Patricia from the underwriting department at Sovereign Trust Bank. I'm calling to verify a few details on your HELOC application before we move it to the final approval stage." The room went dead silent. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. "I am sorry," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Did you say a HELOC application?" "Yes, the home equity line of credit," Patricia said, her tone professional and breezy. "For $150,000. We received the expedited paperwork yesterday. We just need to confirm the employment verification, as the number listed for your employer seems to go to a personal voicemail." $150,000. The room spun. They were not just trying to live here. They were trying to gut the house. They were trying to extract the equity I had just put in and leave me with the debt. "Patricia," I said, gripping the edge of the desk so hard my fingernails turned white. "I did not apply for a HELOC. I just closed on this house 5 days ago. I have not signed anything." There was a long pause on the other end. The breezy tone vanished, replaced by the sharp, alert tone of a banker who realizes they are stepping into a minefield. "You did not apply, Ms. Nguyen. We have a signed application here. It was submitted electronically with a digital signature verification. Read me the contact email on the application," I demanded. "It is Hazel Nguyen, management@gmail.com. "That is not my email," I said. "And the phone number." She read out a number. It was not mine. It was a burner number, the kind you can generate for free on an app. "Patricia, listen to me very carefully," I said, channeling every ounce of authority I possessed. "This is a fraudulent application. I am the sole owner of the property. I am recording this call. I want you to flag this application immediately. Do not release any funds. Do not process any fees. Of course, Ms. Nguyen, I will send this to the fraud department immediately. You should hear from them within 24 hours. I hung up. I did not feel relief. I felt a cold, terrifying clarity. They had my social security number. They had the property details. They had enough of my personal data to convince a bank at least initially that they were me. But a HELOC requires a notary. You cannot just click a button to get $100,000 secured by real estate. A human being has to stamp the document witnessing the signature. Marla. I went back to my computer. I stopped searching for Marla Real Estate Agent and started searching for Marla Notary Public and Document Services. And there she was, Marla Hendricks. She was not a licensed real estate agent at all. She was a notary public and a transaction coordinator for a company called Swift Sign Solutions. I dug deeper, looking for reviews. They were buried on a consumer complaint forum. Be careful. These guys rush you through the signing. I didn't realize I was signing a quitclaim deed until it was too late. They work with predatory lenders. Stay away. Marla was not a stager. She was a rubber stamp for hire. She was the mechanism they were going to use to bypass the pesky requirement of my consent. But even with a crooked notary, they needed something to make it look plausible. They couldn't just forge my signature on a loan document without risking immediate jail time if I contested it. They needed a layer of protection. They needed something that said they had the right to sign for me. And then, a memory hit me. A memory from 3 years ago. I was 29. I was in the middle of a massive audit at work, pulling 18-hour days. My grandmother had just passed away, leaving a chaotic mess of a will. There were small checks to be cashed, a car title to be transferred, utility bills to be shut off. I was drowning in paperwork. Diane had come over to my apartment. She had brought lasagna. She had been kind, soft-spoken, playing the role of the supportive mother perfectly. "Hazel, honey, you are exhausted," she had said. Let me handle the estate stuff for Grandma. You focus on your job. Just sign this so I can talk to the utility companies and the DMV for you. It is just a standard limited power of attorney for the estate handling. I was tired. I was grateful. I had scanned the document, seen the words limited and administrative, and I had signed it. I had trusted her. I pushed my chair back and ran to the closet where I kept my old tax boxes. I tore through the files, tossing papers onto the floor, W-2s from 2018 old medical bills, car insurance policies. Come on, I hissed. I found it at the bottom of a box marked 2019. MISC. It was a photocopy. I had kept a copy. Thank God. I smoothed out the paper. Limited power of attorney. I read the text, my eyes scanning the dense legal jargon. It was supposed to be limited to matters regarding the estate of Beatrice Sullivan. But as I looked closer at the wording in the second paragraph, I saw the ambiguity. And to take any and all actions necessary to manage financial assets and real property interests where the principal has a claim for the duration of the settlement period. It did not have an expiration date. It did not explicitly define real property interests as only Grandma's house. It was vague. It was sloppy. And in the hands of a desperate family and a crooked notary, it was a weapon. They were going to argue that this old document gave Diane the authority to manage my real property interest in the Sageview house. They were going to claim that my purchase of the house was somehow linked to family assets, or that I was incapacitated, or simply that I had authorized her to act on my behalf. Marla would notarize the HELOC application based on this power of attorney, the bank. Seeing a notarized document and a power of attorney that looked valid on the surface might push it through the initial automated checks. By the time I caught them, the money would be in Ethan's account, and the lien would be on my house. The realization made me physically ill. They were not trying to steal a bedroom. They were trying to leverage my credit and my asset to get cash. Ethan didn't want a home office. He wanted $150,000 to dump into his next failure, and he was willing to mortgage my future to get it. I grabbed my phone again. I did not call the police yet. The police would look at a power of attorney and call it a civil matter. They would tell me to take it to court. I needed a shark. I dialed the number of a real estate attorney I had met at a networking event years ago. His name was Marcus Thorne. He was expensive, aggressive, and specialized in title litigation. Marcus Thorne's office, a receptionist answered. This is Hazel and Gwen. I have a frantic emergency involving title fraud, a zombie power of attorney, and a pending 6-figure lien. I need to speak to Marcus, now. 10 minutes later, I was on the line with him, pacing my living room, explaining the timeline, the camera footage, the flyer, the bank call, the Marla discovery, the old document. Marcus listened without interrupting. When I finished, the silence on the line was heavy. Hazel, he said, his voice low and serious. You are not dealing with a family dispute. You are dealing with a sophisticated attempt at equity stripping. They are banking on the fact that banks are slow and the recording office is overwhelmed. Can we stop it? I asked. We have to move faster than they do, Marcus said. I am going to file a lis pendens on your property immediately. That puts a giant red flag on the title that says lawsuit pending. No lender will touch the house with that on it. Second, I am going to draft a revocation of that power of attorney and have it recorded at the county clerk's office this afternoon. We will serve Diane with a formal notice of revocation via process server. Do it, I said. Whatever it costs. There is one more thing, Marcus added. This Marla character, if she submits that HELOC application knowing the power of attorney is being used for a purpose it wasn't intended for, that is conspiracy to commit bank fraud. That is a federal crime. I don't care if they go to jail, I said, looking at the photo of my mother on the mantelpiece, a photo I had foolishly put up, thinking maybe things would be different this time. I just want them to stop. They won't stop until the risk outweighs the reward, Marcus said. Right now, they think they found a loophole. We need to show them that the loophole is actually a noose. He paused, and then he said the sentence that chilled me to the bone, the sentence that reframed the entire conflict. Hazel, listen to me. You are worrying about them moving furniture in. You are worrying about them changing the locks. But that is just distraction. They don't want the keys to your house. What do they want? I asked, though I already knew the answer. They want your signature, Marcus said. Or at least, the ability to replicate it. The house is just the ATM. Your identity is the PIN code. We need to lock down your identity, not just your doors. I hung up the phone. I stood in the middle of my beautiful, empty house. The sun was setting, casting long shadows that looked like bars across the floor. I had been fighting a physical invasion. I had changed locks and installed cameras, but the real invasion was happening on paper, in the invisible world of credit reports and title deeds. I walked over to the front door and looked at the smart lock I had paid $300 for. It felt flimsy now. It felt like a toy. I went back to the kitchen and grabbed the old power of attorney. I took a red marker and wrote void across it in letters 2 inches high. Then I took a picture of it. I opened the group chat. I didn't write a paragraph. I didn't beg. I attached the photo of the voided document, and then I wrote one sentence I know about the HELOC, and I know about Marla. I watched the screen. Read by Diane. Read by Ethan. Read by Tessa. No one typed. No one responded. The dancing dots did not appear. For the first time in days, the silence wasn't peaceful. It was the silence of a predator realizing that the prey has turned around and bared its teeth. I wasn't just Hazel the sister anymore. I was the witness, and I was about to become the plaintiff. The transition from victim to prosecutor does not happen in a single dramatic moment. It happens in the quiet, tedious hours of administrative violence. After I sent the text about the home equity line of credit, I did not wait for their panic. I initiated my own protocol. I spent the next 3 hours on the phone with the 3 major credit bureaus. I placed a fraud alert on my file with Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. I navigated automated menus that seemed designed to make you give up, typing in my social security number and listening to robotic voices tell me my wait time was 20 minutes. I waited. I drank stale coffee and waited. When I finally got a human being on the line, I was polite but implacable. I need a complete freeze, I told the representative from TransUnion. No one accesses this file without a 7-digit PIN that only I possess. If the President of the United States calls for a credit check, you tell him no. Next, I called Sovereign Trust Bank back. I spoke to the fraud department, escalating the ticket Patricia had opened. We have flagged the application, the officer told me. However, Ms. Nguyen, since the request came with a notarized power of attorney, albeit a contested one, it puts us in a gray area until you legally revoke it. We have paused the funding, but the application is technically still active. Keep it active, I said, a plan forming in the back of my mind. Do not cancel it yet. Just ensure no money leaves the vault. If anyone calls to check the status, tell them it is pending final signature verification. I am not sure that is standard procedure, the officer stammered. Consider it cooperation with an ongoing investigation, I said. I will have my lawyer send over the specific instructions. I hung up and called Marcus. He was already drafting the documents. I have the revocation of power of attorney ready to be filed with the county clerk first thing tomorrow morning, Marcus said. I am also drafting a formal cease and desist for Diane, Ethan, and this Marla individual. It outlines the prohibition of trespassing, harassment, and identity theft. It is aggressive, Hazel. It threatens civil litigation and criminal referral. Good, I said. But do not mail them. Not yet. Why not? Because if you mail them, they will just ignore them or claim they never received them. Or worse, they will go underground and try a different angle. I need to serve them, and I need to do it when they are all together, thinking they have won. I looked at the calendar on my wall. Saturday. Ethan had sent the invite for Saturday. I am going to invite them over, I said. Marcus was silent for a moment. Hazel, as your attorney, I have to advise you against being in the same room with people who are actively trying to defraud you. It is volatile. I know, I said. But I need them to show their hand. I need them to bring the papers. I need Marla to attempt to notarize something in front of witnesses. If they do that, it is not just a family dispute anymore. It is attempted felony fraud caught in real time. Can you have a process server on standby? I can do better, Marcus said, his voice shifting from concerned to conspiratorial. I can have the server wait down the street. You give the signal. He walks in and hands them the revocation and the restraining orders right there in your living room. Perfect, I said. After hanging up, I sat in the silence of my command center. My heart was no longer racing. It was beating with a slow, heavy rhythm. I was done reacting to their chaos. It was time to introduce them to mine. I picked up my phone. I opened the group chat. The silence from my previous message was still heavy, but I knew they were panicking. They were probably huddled in Diane's kitchen, trying to figure out how much I knew and whether I was bluffing. I typed a single message. I kept it short. I kept it weary. I wanted to sound like a woman who was tired of fighting, a woman who was ready to capitulate. I am tired of the fighting. If you want to discuss the house and the loan, come over on Saturday at 10 in the morning. We will settle this once and for all. I hit send. Almost immediately, Ethan replied with a thumbs-up emoji. Diane wrote, I am glad you are finally seeing reason. Hazel, we just want what is best for everyone. I stared at the screen. Seeing reason. She thought I was breaking. She thought the void picture was just a tantrum, and that now, faced with the pressure, I was folding. She underestimated how much I had learned about risk assessment. You do not fold when you have a winning hand. You just bet higher. Wednesday turned into Thursday. I did not go into the office. I took personal leave, telling my boss I had a family emergency. It wasn't a lie. The emergency was that my family was a hazard. I needed to organize the evidence. I could not just have a pile of screenshots. I needed a timeline that a judge, a jury, or a police officer could understand in 10 seconds. I called Sam. Sam was an old colleague from my first year at Everline, an internal auditor who could find a missing nickel in a billion-dollar budget. He had left the corporate world to run a consulting firm, but he owed me a favor from when I caught a compliance error that would have cost him his job. Sam, I need you to look at something, I said. I need you to structure a fraud case. He came over an hour later, armed with his laptop and a terrifying amount of caffeine. We sat at my dining table for 6 hours. We built a master spreadsheet. Column 1, date and time. Column 2, event. Column 3, evidence. Column 4, intent. We logged everything. The camera footage of the break-in, the text messages where Diane admitted to opening the door by other means, the unauthorized mail forwarding, the HELOC application time-stamped by the bank, the flyer found on the hydrant, the voicemail from Aunt Carol. Sam was ruthless. This text from Tessa, he said, pointing to the screen. It is hearsay. Weak evidence. Delete it from the primary file. Keep it in the supplementary folder. But this email from the bank confirming the digital signature came from an IP address not associated with you. That is gold. That is the smoking gun. By Friday afternoon, we had a binder. It was 1 inch thick. It was titled Unauthorized Access and Financial Fraud Attempt, 42 Sageview Drive. It was cold, hard, and undeniable. You realize, Sam said, closing the binder, that once you use this, you do not have a family anymore. You have defendants. I haven't had a family for a long time. Sam, I said, running my hand over the plastic cover. I just had liabilities. Sam left, and I was alone again. But I had one more thing to do. The most painful thing. I looked at Milo. He was sleeping on the rug, blissfully unaware that his world was a war zone. If Saturday went the way I thought it would, there would be shouting. There might be police. There would definitely be tension thick enough to choke on. Milo was a rescue. Loud noises and aggression made him shake for hours. I called Sarah. I need a favor, I said. Can Milo stay with you for the weekend? Of course, Sarah said immediately. Is everything okay? You have been quiet. I am just dealing with the house, I said. I want him safe. I packed his bag, his favorite kibble, his squeaky hedgehog toy, his blanket. I drove him over to Sarah's apartment. When I dropped him off, I knelt down and hugged him tight. He licked my chin, his tail wagging slowly. "I will be back for you on Sunday," I whispered into his fur. "And when I bring you home, it will be safe, I promise." Driving back to the empty house, the silence felt different. Without the click of Milo's claws, the house felt like a fortress before a siege. It was hollow, echoing. I made one final stop. I went to the local police precinct. I did not go to the front desk to file a report. I asked for the community liaison officer, a man named Sergeant Miller, whom I had met briefly when I moved in and registered my alarm system. He looked up from his desk, surprised to see me. "Ms. Nguyen, everything all right with the system?" "The system is fine," I said. "I am here to give you a heads up. I am having a domestic situation at my property tomorrow morning. I have invited my family over to discuss a property dispute. I have reason to believe they may attempt to coerce me into signing fraudulent documents, or they may refuse to leave when asked." Sergeant Miller leaned back, his eyes narrowing. "Do you feel you are in danger?" "Not immediate physical danger," I said carefully, "but given the value of the assets involved, tempers will flare. My attorney has prepared a no trespass order that will be served tomorrow. I just wanted to know if I could request a patrol car to be in the vicinity around 10:30, just to ensure the peace is kept." "I cannot promise a dedicated unit," Miller said, taking notes, "but I will put a flag on the address for priority dispatch between 10 and 11. And I will have the patrol for that sector do a few drive-bys." "Thank you," I said. "That is all I ask." I drove home. The sun was setting, casting the sky in bruised purples and reds. I pulled into the driveway and waited for the garage door to open. I walked into the kitchen. The house was clean. The binder was sitting on the island. The cameras were recording. The smart lock was active. I was not scared anymore. The fear had burned off, leaving only a cold, hard resolve. I poured myself a glass of water and stood by the window, looking out at the street where they would arrive in less than 14 hours. They thought they were coming to bully a little sister. They thought they were coming to trick a daughter. They thought they were bringing a notary to finalize a theft. They had no idea that they were walking into a deposition. "Come on, then," I whispered to the glass. "Let's finish this." Friday night arrived with a silence that felt heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. I was sitting on my living room floor, surrounded by the neatly organized piles of evidence Sam and I had compiled. When my phone buzzed, it was not a text from my family. It was a message from a number with a local area code that I did not recognize. The message was short, cryptic, and terrified me more than any threat Diane had made. "Saw your post on the neighborhood watch forum about the unauthorized viewing. If the blonde woman was Marla Hendricks, watch your back. She was sued 3 years ago for false notarization in a probate case. She is not a realtor. She is a fixer." I stared at the screen. I had not posted on a neighborhood watch forum. That meant Brenda, the neighbor with the golden retriever, had posted something, and someone a stranger had recognized the description of Marla and felt compelled to warn me. I immediately went back to my laptop. I had looked up Marla's business, Swift Sign Solutions, but I had not looked up her personal litigation history. I typed Marla Hendricks into the state judiciary case search, filtered by civil defendants. There it was, Estate of Henderson Verso. Hendricks. I paid the $20 to download the case files. As I read through the deposition transcripts, a picture began to form that was far uglier than simple greed. Marla had been a temporary clerk at the county recorder's office for 4 years before starting her consulting business. She knew the internal software. She knew which clerks were lazy and would stamp a document without checking the ID carefully. She knew exactly how to file paperwork that sat in the gray zone, technically legal enough to be processed, but fraudulent in intent. In the Henderson case, she had notarized a deed transfer for a man who had been in a coma at the time of signing. The case was settled out of court, sealed with a non-disclosure agreement, which was why she still had her license. She was not just Tessa's friend. She was a professional predator. She was the architect. My mother and brother were just the clients. My blood ran cold. I realized then that I was not dealing with amateur hour. I was dealing with someone who knew how to weaponize the bureaucracy against me. As I was reading, a notification popped up on my email. It was from Ethan. He had unblocked himself, or perhaps he was using a new address. The subject line was compromise. Please read. I opened it, expecting another demand for money or a room. Instead, it was a PDF attachment titled Residency Affidavit Draft, PDF. Hazel. The email read, "Okay, I get it. You want your space. I respect that. Mom is crazy. You know how she gets. I talked her down. We do not need to move in, but I am in a bind with the business license for the new venture. I need a physical address in this county to qualify for the grant money. I just need you to sign this affidavit stating that I reside at the property. I won't actually live there. It is just for the paperwork, just a signature, and we disappear. I promise." I opened the PDF. It looked harmless. It was a single page, standard font, legal-sounding language. Affidavit of residency. It stated that Ethan Sullivan was a tenant at will, residing in the basement suite of 42 Sageview Drive. I forwarded the document to Marcus immediately with the text, "Is this as dangerous as I think it is?" Marcus called me 3 minutes later. He did not say hello. "Do not sign that," he said, his voice sharp. "Do not even reply to it." "What is it?" I asked. "It is a Trojan horse," Marcus explained. "In our state, if you sign a document attesting that someone lives there, even if they don't physically sleep there, you are granting them constructive residency. If you sign that, and he uses it to get a driver's license or a business permit at your address, he becomes a legal tenant. If you ever wanted to sell the house, or if you wanted to stop him from entering, you would have to formally evict him. An eviction process here takes 6 to 9 months. So he could force his way in later." "Exactly," Marcus said. "He could call a locksmith, show them that signed affidavit and his new driver's license with your address, and the locksmith would let him in legally. The police would look at the paper and say, it is a civil matter. He isn't asking for a favor. Hazel, he is asking for a permanent key." I hung up, feeling sick. Ethan was playing the dumb brother card, acting like it was just a little bureaucratic white lie to help him get a grant. But it was a calculated maneuver to bypass the locks I had just paid thousands of dollars to install. Then, my phone rang. It was Diane. I debated ignoring it. But I needed to hear where her head was. I needed to know if she was in on this specific angle of the con. I answered and put it on speaker, turning on my recorder. "Hazel." Her voice was wet, trembling. She was crying. "Hazel, please, why are you doing this to us?" "Doing what, Mother?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Tearing us apart," she sobbed. "I barely slept last night. I keep thinking about when you were little, how you used to follow Ethan around like a puppy. You loved him so much. He is your blood. He is desperate. He just needs a lifeline. Why do you have to be so cruel? Why do you have to be so cold?" It was a performance I had heard 1,000 times. It was designed to trigger the conditioned guilt I had carried since childhood, the guilt of being the stable one in a house of falling cards. "I am not being cruel," I said. "I am protecting my property." "Property," she spat the word out, the tears vanishing instantly. The shift was so abrupt it was jarring. Her voice dropped an octave, becoming ice-cold and dry. "Is that all you care about, bricks and wood? You think you are so smart with your little lawyer and your cameras? I know about Marla," I said. "I know she was sued for fraud. I know she used to work at the county clerk's office." There was a silence on the other end. A long, heavy silence. "You think that matters?" Diane finally said, her tone devoid of any motherly warmth. "Marla knows how the world works. She knows that truth is just what you can prove on a piece of paper. You are fighting a war you do not understand. Hazel." "I am understanding it better every hour," I said. "If you do not sign that affidavit for Ethan," Diane said, "and if you do not let the HELOC go through, You are going to find that owning a home is very complicated. There are things called liens. Hazel, there are claims of interest. There are ways to tie a title up in litigation for 5 years so you cannot sell it, cannot refinance it, and cannot enjoy it. Are you threatening to file a false lien on my house? I asked. I am telling you, she said, that if you do not help your family, you will face the consequences, on paper, and paper cuts deep. She hung up. I sat there, staring at the phone. Consequences on paper. Suddenly, the memory of the tour from the first day came rushing back to me, but the context shifted violently. I replayed the footage in my mind. Diane with the tape measure, Marla pointing at the kitchen, Tessa taking photos. I had assumed they were measuring for curtains. I had assumed they were taking photos for a rental listing, but I was wrong. I grabbed my laptop and frantically searched for mechanics lien requirements. In my state, to file a mechanics lien, a claim against a property for unpaid labor or improvements, you needed to provide proof that work was done or materials were provided. You needed specific measurements. You needed before photos to document the site conditions. Marla wasn't measuring for drapes. She was measuring the square footage of the windows to create a fake invoice for custom window treatments or glazing repairs. Tessa wasn't taking photos for a Zillow listing. She was taking photos of the job site to attach to a claim that they had performed staging services or interior design consultation that I had not paid for. They were manufacturing a debt. They were going to claim they had done $20,000 or $30,000 worth of work on the house, consulting, measuring, prepping, and then file a lien against the title. If I had a lien, the bank would freeze everything. I would be trapped. They would use the lien as leverage, pay us off, or we let the house rot in legal limbo. My stomach churned with a mixture of nausea and rage. It was brilliant, in a sick, twisted way. It relied on the fact that the county clerk's office did not verify if the work was actually done. They just filed the paper if it looked correct. And Marla knew exactly how to make it look correct. I looked at the binder on my table. I had been building a defense. I had been preparing to say no and stop, but you cannot defend against people who are willing to burn the village down just to warm their hands. You have to take away their matches. I picked up the phone and dialed Marcus again. It was late, almost 7 in the evening, but he answered. Hazel. I figured it out, I said. The measuring, the photos, they are prepping a mechanics lien or a consulting fee claim. They are going to cloud the title. That is a valid theory, Marcus said, sounding impressed and concerned. And given Marla's background, she could probably push it through the recording office before we could block it. I am done blocking, I said. I want to go on the offensive. What do you mean? I don't just want a restraining order, I said, my voice steady and hard. I want Marla to lose her notary commission. I want to file a complaint with the Secretary of State against her bond. I want to report her previous employer for a security breach regarding her knowledge of the clerk system. And I want to draft a preemptive affidavit of non-authorization for any work done on the property. That is the nuclear option, Marcus warned. If you go after Marla's license, she will turn on your family. She will testify that Diane and Ethan put her up to it to save her own skin. Good, I said. Let them eat each other. And Diane, Marcus asked. I want the revocation of the power of attorney to be public, I said. And I want you to draft a letter to the District Attorney's Fraud Division. We don't have to send it yet, but I want it in my hand tomorrow when they walk through that door. Hazel, Marcus said softly, if we do this, there is no going back. You are criminalizing your mother. I looked around my empty house. I looked at the spot on the floor where Milo usually slept, which was empty because I had to send him away for his own safety. I thought about the fear I felt every time my phone buzzed. I thought about the years of financial abuse, the guilt trips, the way they looked at me not as a person, but as a resource to be harvested. They had not just invaded my home, they had tried to weaponize my identity. They had tried to turn my name into a tool for their own survival, regardless of whether it destroyed me. I don't want an apology, Marcus, I said, staring at my reflection in the dark window glass. I don't want them to say they are sorry, I don't even care if they hate me. I took a deep breath, feeling the final tether to my old life snap. I want them to be incapable of doing this to anyone else. I want to break the machine. Prepare the papers. I will have them ready by 8 a.m., Marcus said. I hung up. The house was dark. But for the first time, I didn't feel the need to turn on the lights. I sat in the dark, watching the streetlights flicker on down Sageview Drive. The trap was set. They thought they were coming to negotiate a lease. They thought they were coming to pressure a daughter. They were walking into an execution, not of their lives, but of their lies. And I was going to be the one to pull the lever. Saturday morning arrived with the bleaching, high-contrast brightness of a day that refuses to offer any shadows for hiding. I was awake long before the sun. My coffee had gone cold in the mug 3 times, and 3 times I had poured it out and brewed a fresh pot. Not because I wanted the caffeine, but because the ritual of grinding beans and listening to the drip was the only thing anchoring me to the present moment. At 9:55, I stood by the living room window, obscured by the angle of the wall, watching the street. I was not wearing sweatpants. I was not wearing the comfortable, oversized hoodie I usually wore on weekends. I was dressed in a charcoal gray blazer, a white silk blouse, and tailored black trousers. My hair was pulled back into a severe, tight bun. I looked like I was heading into a board meeting to liquidate a subsidiary, which, in a spiritual sense, was exactly what I was about to do. At 10 o'clock exactly, they turned the corner. It wasn't just the silver sedan. Trailing behind my brother's car was a 14-foot box truck, the kind you rent by the hour for local moves. I felt a spike of adrenaline so sharp it tasted like metal in my mouth. The audacity was breathtaking. They hadn't just come to talk. They hadn't come to negotiate. They had come to move in. They had brought a truck because they assumed that by the time they left, Ethan's furniture would be in my basement, and his claim to my home would be physical fact. The convoy pulled up to the curb. Ethan hopped out of the sedan first. He was wearing a quilted vest over a crisp, button-down shirt and aviator sunglasses, looking every inch the misunderstood genius entrepreneur. He waved at the truck driver, pointing imperiously toward my driveway, directing him to back in. "Not today," I whispered. I walked to the front door. I checked the pocket of my blazer to ensure the small remote for the alarm system was there. I picked up the thick manila envelope lying on the console table. It contained 3 copies of the revocation of power of attorney, 3 copies of the cease and desist order, and a certified copy of my property deed. I stepped out onto the front porch and closed the heavy front door behind me. I heard the electronic whir of the smart lock engaging automatically. I stood on the welcome mat, my feet planted shoulder-width apart, my arms crossed over the folder. Ethan was halfway up the driveway, striding with a bounce in his step. When he saw me, he flashed a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Hazel, there she is," he called out, his voice booming for the benefit of the neighbors. "Look, I know we got off on the wrong foot, so I brought the cavalry. We are going to get this sorted out in no time." Behind him, Diane emerged from the sedan. She was wearing a floral dress and a cardigan, clutching her purse with both hands. Tessa followed, looking nervous, her eyes darting around the street. And bringing up the rear, carrying a clipboard like a shield, was Marla. "Stop," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the morning air like a whip. Ethan faltered, stopping 10 feet from the porch stairs. The smile wavered. "Come on, Hayes. Don't make a scene. The movers are on the clock. It is $80 an hour." "Tell them to leave," I said. "No one is moving in." Diane pushed past Ethan, walking up to the bottom step. She looked up at me, her face arranging itself into a mask of pained disappointment. "Hazel," she hissed, lowering her voice so the truck driver couldn't hear. "Look at you, standing there like a statue. The neighbors are starting to look. Brenda from across the street is watching from her window. Do you want to be the talk of the neighborhood? Open the door. Let's go inside and discuss this like a family." "We are not discussing this like a family," I said, looking down at her. "We are discussing this like property owners and trespassers." Trespassers. Diane's face flushed. "I am your mother. This is your brother. You are acting insane. You are having a breakdown. Marla stepped forward then. She didn't look at my eyes. She looked at the folder in my arms. She smelled opportunity fading, and she moved to salvage it. Hazel, hi, Marla said, her voice dripping with professional condescension. I think there has been a miscommunication regarding the occupancy terms. Ethan isn't trying to take the house. We just need to formalize the residency for his business grant. I have the affidavit right here. She tapped the clipboard with a pen. It is a simple verification. You sign it. We unload a few boxes to the basement to establish use of space, and everyone goes home happy. It is just paperwork. Just paperwork, I repeated. Exactly, Marla said, taking a step up the stairs. Just a signature, to help your brother. I looked at Tessa. She was standing by the hydrangea bush, chewing her lip. She knew. She knew this was a grift. Tessa, I said, do you know what the penalty is for conspiracy to commit deed fraud? Tessa flinched, as if I had thrown a rock at her. Hazel, stop it, Ethan shouted, dropping the charm. He took off his sunglasses. You are being paranoid. Just sign the damn paper so I can get my funding. Why do you have to be such a control freak? Because I own this house, I said. And you don't? We will see about that, Diane snapped. I have a power of attorney that says I can make decisions for you when you are not acting in your right mind. And clearly, you are not. Is that right? I asked. I looked past them, toward the street. Now. It wasn't a shout. It was a statement. Down the block. The dark gray sedan that had been idling by the fire hydrant put it into drive. At the same moment, a black and white police cruiser that had been parked around the corner turned onto Sageview Drive, rolling slowly, its presence heavy and undeniable. The gray sedan pulled up behind the moving truck. A man in a cheap suit got out. He wasn't a lawyer. He was a process server, hired by Marcus. The police cruiser pulled up behind him. Sergeant Miller stepped out, adjusting his belt. The color drained from Ethan's face. He looked from the police to me, then back to the police. What did you do? I protected my asset, I said. Diane turned around, her hand flying to her mouth. You called the police on your own mother, Hazel. How could you? This is shameful. Sergeant Miller walked up the driveway, his boots crunching on the gravel. He stopped next to Ethan, but he looked at me. Ms. Wen, Miller said, nodding. Is there a problem here? Yes, Sergeant, I said. These individuals are trespassing. I have asked them to leave, and they are refusing. Furthermore, they have brought a commercial vehicle to unload property into a residence they do not have a lease for. She is lying, Ethan blurted out, pointing at me. I live here. I have stuff here. Miller looked at Ethan. Sir, do you have a key? Ethan stammered. Well, no. She changed the locks, but I have a right to be here. It is a family trust property. My mother has power of attorney. Diane fumbled in her purse. Yes, I do. I have it right here. She pulled out the crumpled photocopy of the old document. I didn't move. I simply opened my manila envelope. I pulled out the crisp, freshly notarized document Marcus had prepared. Officer, I said, this is a formal revocation of power of attorney, filed with the county clerk at 8:30 this morning. Whatever document she is holding is void, and this, I handed him the second paper, is the grant deed, sole ownership, Hazel and Gwyn, no trust, no LLC members, just me. Miller took the papers. He scanned them for 5 seconds. He looked at the seal on the deed. He looked at the timestamp on the revocation. He handed them back to me. Seems pretty clear to me, Miller said. He turned to the group. Folks, the owner has asked you to leave. If you remain on the property, you can be cited for criminal trespass. This is ridiculous, Marla interrupted. Her voice was shrill now, the professional veneer cracking. We have a verbal contract. We have a pending loan application. I looked at Marla. Officer, I said, that woman is Marla Hendricks. I have reason to believe she is attempting to solicit a signature on a fraudulent affidavit. I would like to request that you identify her for the record. In case this goes to litigation. Marla's eyes went wide. She took a step back, nearly tripping over the garden hose. I am just a consultant. I am just observing. ID, ma'am, Miller said, holding out his hand. Marla hesitated. She looked at Ethan, then at Diane. No one moved to help her. Reluctantly, she pulled her driver's license from her bag and handed it to the officer. Miller looked at it, then looked at her. Marla Hendricks, Miller read aloud. Okay, I will note your presence in the incident report. Tessa let out a small, strangled sob. She grabbed Ethan's arm. Ethan, let's go. Please, the police are taking names. Ethan shook her off, his face purple with rage. He looked up at me on the porch. I was only 3 feet above him, but I felt like I was looking down from a mountain. You think you won, Ethan spat. You think because you have a badge here you are tough. You are nothing without us. Hazel, you are just a lonely, bitter clerk with a house no one wants to visit. I am fine with that, I said. The driver of the moving truck leaned out of his window. He sounded bored and annoyed. Hey, buddy, you want me to unload this or what? I got another job at noon. No, Ethan screamed at him. No, just drive away. That is a cancellation fee, the driver shouted back. I don't care. Ethan kicked the tire of my sedan, my old Honda, leaving a scuff mark on the bumper. Sir, Miller warned, stepping forward. Do not damage the vehicles. Ethan threw his hands up. We are leaving. We are leaving. The process server stepped forward then. He didn't say a word. He just walked up to Diane and thrust a stack of papers into her chest. Instinctively, she grabbed them. You have been served, the man said flatly. Restraining order and notice of pending civil action. Diane looked at the papers as if they were burning coals. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a hatred so pure it stole my breath for a second. It wasn't the anger of a mother who was disappointed. It was the rage of a parasite that had been detached from its host. You are dead to me, Diane whispered. Do not call me when you are sick. Do not call me when you lose this job. You have no mother. I haven't had a mother in 20 years. Diane, I said softly. I just had a billing department. She gasped, clutching her pearls in a gesture so cliché it would have been funny if it weren't so tragic. She spun around and marched to the car. Get in the car. Tessa, she commanded. Tessa looked at me one last time. There was no hatred in her eyes, only fear. She knew that by witnessing this, she was now an accomplice if she didn't get out. She scrambled into the back seat. Marla practically ran to her own car. Ignoring the consultant dignity she had tried to maintain, Ethan was the last to go. He stood there for a moment, glaring at the house, measuring what he had lost. Then he got into his sedan and slammed the door. I stood on the porch and watched them leave. The moving truck backed out awkwardly, beeping loudly, blocking traffic. The silver sedan peeled out, tires screeching slightly. The process server got in his car and left. Only Sergeant Miller remained. He walked back to the bottom of the stairs. You okay, Ms. Nguyen? He asked. My knees felt like water. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving me shaking, but I nodded. I am okay. Thank you, officer. I really appreciate it. Keep those papers handy, Miller said, putting on his sunglasses. And keep your cameras on. People like that, they usually don't take no for an answer the first time. I know, I said. He drove away. I was alone. The street was quiet again. I looked across the street. Brenda was standing in her window, holding her coffee cup, staring openly. I didn't look away. I nodded to her. A sharp, acknowledging nod. She hesitated, then nodded back and closed her blinds. I turned and went inside. I locked the deadbolt. I leaned my back against the door and slid down until I was sitting on the floor. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. I felt hollowed out, scraped clean. My phone rang. It was Marcus. I heard from the process server, Marcus said. He said they took the service. Good job standing your ground. Hazel. They are gone, I said, my voice trembling. It is over. No, Marcus said, and his tone was grim. It is not over. That was just the physical confrontation. Now comes the retaliation. They are embarrassed. Hazel. And narcissists do not handle public humiliation well. They are going to stop trying to break in, and they are going to start trying to break you. What do you mean? I mean, get ready for the paper war, Marcus said. I just got an alert on the title watch. Someone just filed a lis pendens against your property. It was filed electronically 10 minutes ago. Who filed it? I asked, though I knew. A shell company, Marcus said. But the signatory is Ethan Sullivan. He is suing you for breach of verbal contract regarding shared equity. It is a frivolous lawsuit. Hazel, it won't hold up in court. But until we get it dismissed, your title is frozen. You technically cannot refinance or sell. He just threw a grenade into your closing documents. I closed my eyes, resting my head against the cool wood of the door. Let him sue, I whispered. I have the evidence. We have the evidence, Marcus corrected. Get some rest. Hazel, Monday morning, we go to war. I hung up the phone. I looked at the empty living room where, just an hour ago, my mother had tried to shame me into submission. It was still my house. They hadn't crossed the threshold, but as I looked at the sunlight streaming in, I realized that Marcus was right. The lock on the door had worked, but they had found a window I couldn't board up. They were going to drag me through the mud of the legal system, hoping I would suffocate. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. I poured the cold coffee down the sink. I started a new pot. Bring it on, I said to the empty room. The following Monday morning did not begin with a victory lap. It began with a summons to human resources. I walked into the glass-walled office of the HR director at Everline Habitat Studio at 9 o'clock sharp. My stomach was a knot of cold dread. In my line of work, risk management for high-value commercial projects, financial integrity is not just a preference, it is a requirement. We handle sensitive data, bond approvals, and project budgets in the millions. A risk manager with a compromised financial profile is considered a liability. Janet, the HR director, did not offer me coffee. She turned her monitor around. Hazel, we received a notification from our compliance software this morning, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. There has been a significant flag on your credit report. A lis pendens was filed against a property in your name, alleging fraud and breach of contract, and your credit score dropped 40 points overnight due to a contested identity alert. I stared at the screen. There it was. Ethan's lawsuit. He hadn't just sued me. He had weaponized the court system to attack my livelihood. By claiming I had promised him equity, he had created a dispute that made me look unstable to my employer. It is a retaliatory filing, Janet, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the shaking in my hands. I am the victim of an attempted title theft by estranged family members. I have already involved legal counsel and the police. I believe you, Janet said, sighing. But until this is resolved, I cannot have you signing off on the Millennial Tower project. The underwriters won't allow it. I have to place you on administrative review. You can work from the office, but your signing authority is suspended. I walked back to my desk, feeling the eyes of my colleagues on me. I had built my career for 10 years. I was the one who fixed problems. I was the one who was bulletproof. And in 48 hours, my brother had managed to strip my professional credibility simply by filing a piece of paper that cost him $300 to submit. This was no longer just about a house. This was total war. I opened my laptop and called Marcus. They hit my job. Marcus, I said, they are trying to starve me out. It is a classic pressure tactic, Marcus said, his voice grim. They figure if they squeeze your finances, you will settle just to make the lawsuit go away. Diane's lawyer sent over a proposal an hour ago. Let me guess, I said. They want a family meeting to discuss a settlement. Exactly. They are proposing a constructive trust agreement, essentially. They drop the lawsuit if you sign a document acknowledging that the house is a family asset, held in your name for the benefit of the trust. They want to turn you into a landlord with no power. No, I said. Hazel, if we go to court, it could take 6 months to get a dismissal. Can your job wait 6 months? I am not waiting 6 months, I said. And I am not settling. I am countersuing. I want you to file the motion for the identity fraud investigation today, and I want you to subpoena Marla Hendricks. We need more than just the camera footage to nail the fraud intent, Marcus warned. The footage shows them in the house, but it doesn't prove they intended to forge your signature. They will claim they were just preparing documents for you to sign willingly. I will get the proof, I said. I hung up and logged onto social media for the first time in days. It was a mistake, but a necessary one. Ethan had been busy. He hadn't posted directly about the lawsuit. He was too smart for that. Instead, he had posted a long, rambling story on Facebook about betrayal and forgetting where you came from. It is sad when you help raise someone, protect them from bullies, and support them, only to have them slam the door in your face the moment they get a little paycheck, he wrote. Building an empire is hard when your own blood tries to steal the foundation. The comments were a cesspool of sympathy. Stay strong. Ethan karma never misses. Some people just have no heart. He was controlling the narrative. He was painting me as the thief. He was gaslighting the entire community. But as I scrolled through the comments, my eyes caught a name I hadn't seen in years. Leo Sullivan. Leo was my cousin. My father's brother's son. He was 25, a quiet kid who worked in IT and mostly stayed out of the family drama. He had liked Ethan's post. But then, 5 minutes later, he had unliked it. I stared at his name. Leo was the family tech support. Whenever Diane forgot her email password, or Ethan needed to set up a new phone, they called Leo. I took a gamble. I sent him a direct message. Leo, I know you see what is happening. I am about to lose my job because of lies Ethan is telling. I am not asking you to take sides publicly. I am asking if you know anything about a notary appointment last week. I waited 10 minutes, 20 minutes, then 3 dots appeared. I shouldn't get involved. Hazel, Aunt Diane will kill me. Diane isn't going to pay your rent. Leo, I typed back, and if this goes to court, subpoenas are going to fly. I just want the truth. A minute later, an image loaded in the chat. It was a screenshot of an email thread. The subject line was signatures. The date was 2 weeks ago before I had even closed on the house. The email was from Diane to Ethan. Leo helped me scan that old birthday card Hazel sent me in 2018. The one with the cursive signature. I cropped it. Attached is the high-res file. Marla said if we have a clean sample, she can trace it onto the affidavit so it looks natural. Make sure you practice it. My breath caught in my throat. This was it. This wasn't just implied fraud. This was premeditated. Documented conspiracy to commit forgery. They had been planning to fake my signature before they even stepped foot in the house. They had involved Leo, probably telling him it was for a surprise gift or something innocuous to get the digital file. Thank you. Leo, I typed. You just saved my life. She told me it was for a surprise insurance policy she wanted to buy for you. Leo replied, I didn't know until I saw the lawsuit today. I am sorry. Hazel, I forwarded the screenshot to Marcus immediately. We have them. I told him when he picked up. I have an email chain of Diane sending my signature sample to Ethan for Marla to trace. That changes everything, Marcus said, the energy in his voice spiking. That is a felony. That is conspiracy. We don't just file a motion. We file for an emergency injunctive hearing. I can get us in front of a judge by Thursday. Thursday is too late, I said. My review at work is Wednesday. I need this dead by tomorrow. Then we force their hand, Marcus said. We send this screenshot to the opposing counsel, Diane's cheap lawyer, and we send a draft of the criminal complaint to Marla. We tell them we are filing with the district attorney at 5 p.m. tomorrow, unless they drop the lawsuit and sign a confession of non-interest. No, I said. A cold and hard idea formed in my mind. Marla is the weak link, but Tessa is the coward. I thought about Tessa's face on the driveway, the way she had flinched when the police arrived. She was a follower. She wanted the money, but she didn't want the handcuffs. Marcus, draft a separate letter to Tessa, I said. Inform her that as a named party in the conspiracy since she was present at the trespassing and is married to the beneficiary, she will be named as a co-defendant in the civil RICO suit we are preparing. Explain that in a RICO case, all assets of the defendants are subject to seizure to pay damages. Her car, her joint account with Ethan, everything. That is heavy-handed, Marcus said. Do it. I spent the rest of the afternoon building the timeline. I printed the email from Leo. I transcribed the audio from the camera where Marla said, "The owner doesn't need to know." I matched the timestamps. At 6 o'clock, I received a text from an unknown number. "Please don't do this. I have kids." It was Tessa. I didn't reply. I let her sit in the silence. I wanted her to sweat. I wanted her to look at Ethan across the dinner table and realize that his genius plans were about to cost her everything she owned. Tuesday morning. The atmosphere had shifted. I went to work, keeping my head down, doing the paperwork I was allowed to do. At 10 o'clock, Marcus called. "It is working," he said. "Marla's lawyer, she hired one this morning, just called me. She is claiming she was misled by your family. She wants to cut a deal. She is willing to sign an affidavit stating she was pressured to notarize documents without the signatory present. Don't give her a deal yet," I said. "I want them all in a room. We have a scheduling conference for the restraining order set for tomorrow afternoon via Zoom," Marcus said. It was supposed to be procedural, but given the evidence, the judge might hear the motion to dismiss the lis pendens right then and there. "Good," I said. That night, I sat in my command center one last time. I looked at the binder. It was no longer just a defensive shield. It was a weapon. I thought about Diane's threat. "We will open it by other means." She had tried the physical door. She had tried the legal door. Now, she was finding out that the door she had actually opened was a trap door, and she was standing right on top of it. I looked at the timeline I had created. November 12th. Diane requests signature sample from Leo. November 15th. Marla accesses county records for the property. November 20th. Unauthorized entry and measurement. November 21st. HELOC application submitted with fraudulent email. November 24th. Confrontation and filing of frivolous lawsuit. It was a perfect circle of malice. My phone rang. It was Diane. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message. I played it back, listening to the change in her voice. The arrogance was gone. The anger was gone. There was only a frantic, desperate waver. "Hazel, pick up. Tessa is hysterical. She says you are going to take her car. What is wrong with you? We need to talk. We can drop the lawsuit. Just don't send those emails to the district attorney. Think about your family. Think about the family name." I saved the voicemail. It was the final piece of evidence. It was an admission of guilt. She wasn't asking me to stop lying. She was begging me not to tell the truth. I sent a text to Marcus. "I am ready for tomorrow. Prepare the final agreement, but add a clause." "What clause?" Marcus replied. "I want a permanent severance." I typed, "I want them to sign a document admitting that they have no legal, financial, or familial claim to me or my assets. I want it notarized, and I want Marla to be the one who has to watch them sign it before she surrenders her license. That is poetic justice." Marcus wrote back, "I will draw it up." I turned off the lights in the command center. I went upstairs to the master bedroom. For the first time since I bought the house, I didn't feel like I was squatting in my own life. The fear was gone. The guilt, that heavy, Catholic guilt Diane had installed in my buttons like software, was deleted. I looked at the empty corner where Milo's bed belonged. "One more day, buddy," I whispered. "Then we are free." The next morning, I put on my best suit. I didn't go to the courthouse. The hearing was remote. I sat at my dining table, my laptop camera positioned perfectly to show the empty, serene house behind me. I logged into the court portal. The screen split into 4 boxes. Top left, the judge, a stern-looking woman with glasses. Top right, me. Bottom left, Marcus. Bottom right, the defendants. They were squeezed into one frame, sitting around Diane's kitchen table. Ethan looked pale, wearing a suit that was too tight. Diane looked aged. her makeup harsh under the fluorescent kitchen lights. Tessa was sitting slightly apart from them, looking down at her hands. Marla wasn't there. Her square was black, represented only by her audio feed and her lawyer. "Calling the matter of Nguyen versus Sullivan," the judge said, her voice tinny through the speakers. "We are here for a preliminary hearing on the restraining order and the motion to expunge the lis pendens." I looked at the pixelated faces of my family. They looked small. They looked terrified. I took a sip of water. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just waited for the demolition to begin. The virtual courtroom was a study in contrasts. On my screen, the background was my pristine, sun-drenched living room, the very asset they were trying to steal. On their screen, huddled around my mother's kitchen table. The lighting was yellow and harsh. Ethan was sweating through his collar. Diane was clutching a rosary, a prop she hadn't used since my grandmother's funeral. Tessa looked like she was about to vomit. "Ms. Nguyen," Judge Patterson said, her voice cutting through the static, "we are here regarding the motion to expunge the lis pendens filed by Mr. Sullivan and the counter-motion for a permanent restraining order. Given the allegation of fraud, I am inclined to hear the evidence regarding the title dispute first." Ethan's lawyer, a man named Mr. Henderson, who looked like he billed by the minute and regretted taking this case, cleared his throat. "Your Honor, my client asserts that there was a verbal agreement for shared equity based on family trust funds used to secure the down payment. The filing is merely to protect his interest while we litigate." "There are no trust funds," I said. I didn't shout. I didn't look at the camera. I looked at the shared screen button. "Your Honor, may I present Exhibit A?" "Proceed," the judge said. I clicked the button. The first document appeared. It was the wire transfer receipt for the down payment. 100% of the funds came from my personal savings and a liquidation of my 401k. I stated clearly, "There is no trust. There is no cosigner. The source of funds has been verified by the title company." I didn't wait for Henderson to object. I clicked to the next slide. "Exhibit B," I continued, "a timeline of unauthorized access." The screen filled with the logs from my security system. November 20th, 4:15 p.m., unauthorized entry by Diane Sullivan, Tessa Sullivan, and Marla Hendricks, audio transcript. "The owner does not need to know. Just make it look legal." I played the audio clip. It was only 10 seconds long, but it landed like a grenade. Marla's voice, raspy and arrogant, filled the virtual courtroom. "Just make it look legal." I saw Marla's lawyer, who was on a separate feed, stiffen. He muted his microphone and began speaking rapidly to someone off camera. "Your Honor." Henderson stammered. "This is out of context. They were discussing interior design." "Interior design does not require a notary," Marcus interrupted. He was sharp, lethal, and enjoying this. "Which brings us to Exhibit C." I displayed the email from Leo, the subject line signatures, the attachment, my cropped signature from the birthday card. "This is an email sent from the first defendant, Diane Sullivan, to the second defendant, Ethan Sullivan," Marcus explained. "It contains a high-resolution scan of my client's signature, stolen from a personal card. The text explicitly instructs the recipient to practice it for the purpose of tracing." The judge leaned in closer to her monitor. Her expression shifted from bored administrative fatigue to sharp, predatory interest. "Mr. Henderson," she said, her voice dropping a register, "are you aware that your client is in possession of a digital forgery kit?" Ethan's face went gray. He looked at Diane. Diane looked at the rosary. I have no knowledge of that email, Your Honor," Henderson said, distancing himself immediately. "There is more," I said. "Exhibit D, the HELOC application." I pulled up the document from Sovereign Trust Bank. I highlighted the IP address and the burner email. This application for $150,000 was submitted 2 days after the unauthorized entry, I said. "It uses the fraudulent contact information, and it was notarized." I paused. I looked directly at the black square that represented Marla. It was notarized by Marla Hendricks, I said. Ms. Hendricks, did you witness me sign this document? Marla's square remained silent, her lawyer unmuted. Your Honor, my client asserts her Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination regarding the notary log. That is a wise choice, Judge Patterson said dryly, because if she admits to notarizing a signature that the plaintiff proves was forged, she is looking at 5 years in state prison. Diane suddenly slammed her hand on the table, startling everyone. The rosary rattled against the wood. This is a trap, she screamed, abandoning the sweet old lady act. She set us up. She is my daughter. She owes us this house. We sacrificed everything for her, and she treats us like criminals. Ms. Sullivan, control yourself, the judge warned. No, Diane yelled, standing up. It is family property. Ethan needs it. He is the firstborn. It is his birthright. It is a 3-bedroom contemporary in a suburb. Mrs. Sullivan, not the throne of England, Judge Patterson snapped. And your birthright argument does not override the penal code regarding identity theft. The judge looked at the evidence on the screen, the timeline, the texts, the forged application, the mail forwarding request I had added at the last minute. It wasn't a dispute. It was a dissection. Mr. Henderson, the judge said, I am going to save you some time. You are going to withdraw the lis pendens immediately. If it is not expunged by 5 o'clock today, I am referring this entire file to the District Attorney's Fraud Unit, and I will personally recommend an investigation into Mr. Sullivan and Mrs. Sullivan for conspiracy to commit grand larceny. Ethan made a noise that sounded like a balloon deflating. He slumped in his chair, covering his face with his hands. The image he had tried so hard to protect the successful entrepreneur. The magnate was gone. He was just a 38-year-old man trying to steal his little sister's credit rating, but the final blow didn't come from the judge. It came from the weakest link, Tessa, who had been silent the entire time. Suddenly looked up. She looked at Marla's black square on the screen. It was her idea, Tessa blurted out. Tessa, shut up, Ethan hissed. No, Tessa cried, tears streaming down her face. I am not going to jail for this. I have kids. Ethan, I am not losing my car. It was Marla. Marla told them how to do it. She said she knew the clerks at the county office. She said if we got the signature, she could slip the deed transfer into the pile on a Friday afternoon. She did it before. Objection, Marla's lawyer shouted. Overruled, the judge said, her eyes wide. The court reporter will note that statement. It was over. The alliance had shattered. They were eating each other alive on a Zoom call while I drank sparkling water in my living room. Marcus leaned forward in his frame. Your Honor, in light of this admission, we have prepared a settlement agreement. If the defendants sign a permanent restraining order, a confession of judgment regarding the frivolous lawsuit, and a binding agreement to never contact Ms. Nguyen or claim interest in her assets again, my client is willing to, for the moment, withhold the criminal complaint, provided the lis pendens is removed within the hour. The judge looked at the defendants. I suggest you sign whatever he puts in front of you, because if this lands on a prosecutor's desk, you are all going away. The signing process was digital, fast, and humiliating. I watched the notifications pop up on my screen. Ethan Sullivan has signed. Diane Sullivan has signed. Marla Hendricks has signed. With every notification, a weight lifted off my chest. It wasn't just ink on a page. It was the severing of a cord that had been strangling me for 36 years. The lis pendens is expunged, the judge ruled. The restraining orders are effective immediately. Any violation will result in immediate arrest. Ms. Nguyen, you have your title, and frankly, you have my sympathy. Case closed. The screen went black. I sat in the silence of my dining room. My laptop hummed. The fan overhead spun in a slow, rhythmic circle. I didn't cheer. I didn't pop champagne. I felt an exhaustion so deep it felt like it was in my marrow. But beneath the exhaustion, there was something else. A solidity. A foundation that couldn't be cracked. I closed my laptop. I stood up and walked to the front door. I opened it. The air outside was cool, smelling of upcoming winter. I looked down the street. There were no silver sedans, no moving trucks, no police cars, just the quiet, boring, beautiful suburbs. I saw a car pull up. It was Sarah. She opened the back door, and a blur of scruffy fur shot out. Milo ran up the driveway, his ears flopping, his tail wagging so hard his whole body shook. I knelt down on the porch, and he slammed into me, licking my face, making happy little yipping sounds. "Hey, buddy," I whispered, burying my face in his neck. "You are home, for real this time." I thanked Sarah, who gave me a knowing hug and didn't ask for details. She knew it was done. I walked back inside with Milo. I closed the front door. I placed my hand on the smart lock. Click. The sound was mechanical, final, and perfect. I walked into the living room. It wasn't empty anymore. Over the last 2 days, while waiting for the court date, I had unpacked. I had put down the rugs. I had arranged my books. I had hung the art I liked, not the art Diane approved of. I sat down on the floor, on a rug that was deep blue, the color of the ocean at night. Milo circled 3 times and flopped down, resting his heavy head on my shin. He let out a long sigh, the sigh of a dog who knows he doesn't have to watch the door anymore. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I picked it up. It was a notification from the county clerk's automated system. Update title alert. List pendants removed. Title status clear. Owner Hazel Nguyen. I deleted the group chat. I blocked the numbers one last time. Not out of fear, but out of housekeeping. You don't keep trash in the house. I looked around at the walls. They were mine. The mortgage was mine. The silence was mine. Diane had said I would lose my family. She said I would be alone. She tried to make alone sound like a curse, but sitting there, in the golden hour light, with a loyal dog and a clear title, I realized she was wrong. I wasn't alone. I was autonomous. They had wanted to turn me into a resource. They wanted to harvest my credit score and my labor to fuel their delusions of grandeur. They thought they owned me because they shared my DNA. But a family isn't a business, and a child isn't an asset class. I stroked Milo's ears, listening to the house settle around me. It didn't groan. It didn't creak. It just stood there, strong and protective. I didn't lose a family. I just stopped being their asset, and that was a price I would happily pay, every single month, for the rest of my life. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I love seeing our community grow across the world. Don't forget to subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who need a reminder that standing up for yourself is always worth the fight. See you in the next one.